Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Avalon, the Riven Veil from Shadowborne Games. Avalon, the Riven Veil is a 2 to 4 player area control game. This here is a prototype, all rules and components subject to change, and I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. But I'm going to try to give you a general overview of the game, how it works in higher level detail, and then from there dive into my thoughts, timestamps to everything down below. But starting off the bat, this is an area control game. Across 3 rounds of play, or specifically they're called seasons, you have 3 seasons of play. You're going to be checking to see who has the most control over these regions. And if you're like, Alex, that's not a region, that's a giant cloud, well, the Mists of Avalon will turn into regions as the players explore them. And so you're trying to get your people out onto the board. You're going to go ahead and have a war phase at the end of each season, in which in every single region in which there are units, you're going to have a combat, see who wins, and give out points for controlling different regions. Like I said, it's a area control game. Get your people on the board, and then try to get as many points as possible. Now, there are a lot of other ways to get points, but let's start from there, talk about the general structure. So the general structure, like I said already, is you have 3 seasons. In each season, you're going to start with a preparation phase, the mist phase. We're going to set up and rearrange the board, and this board is going to rearrange, which means as players explore the board, as they move on to and further explore the Mists of Avalon, possibly getting to the center where you can get a whole chunk of points over there, what's going to happen next is in each round, you're going to reset the board and get rid of all the spots, and Avalon will have to be re-explored, unless you put settlements onto certain regions, and that will kind of lock them into place. But outside of those elements, the Mists of Avalon will reform, and players in each season will re-explore the board and refight for control over the various regions. That's going to be the mist phase over here, where you're going to go ahead and set up that sequence. Now, part of that sequence over here is you're going to go ahead and gather artifacts equal to the number of players. You're going to also be gathering the Holy Grail over here, and then a whole bunch of monsters from this deck, and you're going to be shuffling everything up and then placing them down onto the various regions of the board. So as you try to explore Avalon, you're going to be uncovering monsters, the Holy Grail, as well as various artifacts as you explore these regions. That's going to be the setup phase in each round. From there, you're going to move into the actual rounds. The rounds over here are going to be where players play cards. You see, Avalon is a card-driven game. You're going to have 4 decks of cards in this game. Each of the cards in those decks is 100% unique. So you have these 4 decks over here, which represent the 4 core actions. Deploying new units onto the board, moving units around the board, getting settlements out, and then combat cards, which will be necessary during the combat rounds. These are the 4 decks you have. Now, all of the cards might let you do different things. You might have cards that let you deploy and move. You might have cards that let you build a settlement and also deploy people. You'll have a mix of different things, but every deploy card is guaranteed to deploy units, every move card is guaranteed to move units, every settlement card is guaranteed to help you put a settlement out, and every war card is going to be helpful for the combat rounds. And so what's going to happen is in these rounds 1, 2, and 3, players are going to go ahead and play a card. Now, cards on their anatomy over here have a few things you need to know about. There's the initiative, which is going to determine who goes first when the cards are played. There's the cost of the card, which is how many other cards you have to discard from your hand in order to play this, and then there's the actual ability of the card down here. The color of the card indicates which deck it's from, so green is deploy, yellow is move, blue is settlement, and red is combat. So when players are going to go ahead and look at their hand of cards, they'll select one card to play, players will reveal their cards all at once and see who has the highest initiative, and that player will go ahead and play first. Ties are going to be broken either based on the Holy Grail, or based on the point track, depending on how that plays out, but you're going to go ahead and resolve your actions. Now, you're trying to get units onto the board. When you deploy, you can go ahead and deploy your actual leader. You can deploy your champions over here, which are these slightly more powerful units, and then you can deploy your basic units as well. And you're going to be deploying them into the outer regions of the board, into the mists all around the external edge over here. Now, as you get settlements out into middle regions, as you actually build settlements, you'll be able to build and you'll be able to deploy where you have settlements as well. So getting those settlements out will really save you a lot of time, because you won't have to constantly work your way in every single turn. The more settlements you have, the more flexibility you have. They'll also be giving you ongoing bonuses, because when you build a settlement, you're going to get whatever reward is underneath the settlement marker, but you're also going to get that in every future round as well. Settlements are an investment towards the future. Then there's moving. Moving is going to help you, well, move. You're going to be able to move your people further and further around the board into the center. Your leader, once per round, can explore a mist area. So as you move around the board, you have the opportunity to try to turn over these regions, get an exploration bonus, which is going to be one of these over here. At the top of each region, you can see little bonuses, and then also knowing which cards are going to be in play. So as I explore a new region, I can see that, look, we have this monster over here, where we can go ahead and bid for favor of this creature to hopefully help us, well, fight others and have more combat strength in battle. battles. You see, there's 3 kinds of cards over there, or well, really 2 kinds of cards. The Holy Grail is an artifact in itself. You're going to have the various artifacts of the board that are going to go around. So if we find an artifact over here, let's say, for example, these are all creatures. We have all creatures. We have an artifact over here. Nope, we're going to grab an artifact and place it down so you can see this. So for example, if we had an artifact over here, this artifact would lend its point value to the area control, but also whoever wins this region is going to get that artifact along with whatever abilities come into play, and also letting you power up either your leader or your champion depending on where you place those artifacts. So artifacts are going to help you because, well, points and abilities. Monsters, creatures, they're going to help you because they have their own strength, they also have their abilities, and when they come out, players are going to be bidding using the initiative value of cards in their hands. Players are going to be bidding with the initiative value in order to take control of monsters, being mindful of the fact that you can only control 1 monster in round 1, 2 monsters in round 2, and 3 monsters in round 3. So there's an escalating level to those monsters as you play through them. But you're going to go through these rounds over here, playing these cards, trying to get settlements onto the board, trying to move around for the positioning, and trying to deploy more units because each unit is going to contribute its strength in combat. So you want to get as many units on the board as possible because, yes, you will be playing combat cards, but an initial starting value is going to give you, well, more combat force to be able to take down your opponents. You're going to go through that sequence of going ahead playing cards in each round 1, round 2, and round 3. At the end of each turn, you're going to go ahead and draw 2 new cards. So even though you're paying for cards constantly, you're also drawing cards back into your hand at the end of round 1, round 2, and round 3. When that's done, we're going to go to actually resolving the battles. You're going to be resolving a battle in every single revealed region on the board, starting from the season, working your way around on the outside edge, and then on the inner edge, and then to the center, resolving combats in each region. Now, in each region, you're going to be adding up the strength of your leaders, the strength of your champions, the strength of your individual people, the strength of your monsters, as well as any artifacts that are going to help you there. And you're going to go ahead and set your starting strength. So let's say there's a battle over here, and my starting strength is 8, and the opposing player's starting strength is 5. So we know what the starting strength is as we resolve the battle in, again, every single one of these regions. From there, players are going to play combat cards. That's where combat cards are a little bit different than the other decks. See, the other decks are going to be the core actions you take in round 1, 2, and 3. The combat cards, on the other hand, those are going to be things you're playing during combat. And when you play a combat card, you're going to ignore its initiative value. It's no longer relevant. You're still going to pay its cost, but you're going to play a card, and another player can play their card as well, but then you're engaging in a bit of a push your luck game. You see, past the fact that there's going to be an ability here, abilities might negate other abilities. They might give you things like maybe kill 2 units from your opponent. Maybe if you win, you get something as a bonus. There'll be a variety of abilities on the combat cards, but there's also a number at the bottom, which is your potential strength. And potential is the key word. You see, right now, if I'm looking at this card, I'm going to say, oh, look, I can add potentially 10 strength to my existing strength, but in order to do that, I'm drawing cards from these decks with a push your luck mechanism. Think of it like blackjack. I'm going to draw a card, look, and I got a 4. I'll take another deck over here, and I'm going to go ahead, ooh, I got 9. Okay, I'm going to stop right now. That's as close as I want to go. You see, right now, I have 4 and 5, which is 9, and as long as you're underneath or equal to your total, you get that much value. Versus if you go too high, if you go over, you'll bust, and you'll only get half the value instead. So you want to be mindful not to go above the value because you're going to get a whole lot less reward. And the problem is, I'm going to go ahead and draw my cards, keeping a poker face as clean as possible, and then my opponent will draw theirs, and you'll see who actually has the most, but if I bust, I won't tell you, because that will give you all the information you need to play it safe. So you have to keep pushing yourself as well, and then at the end of it, you add your total value, whether you busted or not, to the cards you played. Now, if you win the combat, you lose the card you played, as well as the cost you paid to play that card. If you lose the combat, you're going to get those costs back, although if you did bust, you will lose the card itself. You'll still get the costs back, but you'll lose the card itself. But that's how combats are resolved. You're trying to resolve a combat in each region, playing a combat card, but an important thing, a very important thing to note, is you can only play combat cards where your leader or champions are. So if I have a whole bunch of people in a region, that's not going to let me play a combat card. Yes, they'll contribute their strength, but I won't be able to actually play a combat card. You need a leader or champion in order to play those combat cards, so you want to try to make sure those are as evenly distributed as possible, since having multiple leaders or champions in a region is often not that helpful, versus spreading them out lets you actually engage in more combats in the game. Which means generally you're going to be engaged in maximum 4 combats as far as the cards you're playing, although getting a few truce in battle can still be very worth it just for the secondary value. And there are some monsters that act like a champion, so lets you play even more cards if you want. But that's the general idea of the game. This is an area control game. You're going to be getting points from a few different areas. You're going to be getting points from the regions over here as you get control. You're going to be getting points from cards that give you points as you go. And then you're also going to be getting points from these. We haven't talked about these, but in each round, you're going to start with getting one of these in round 1. These are going to come out, and these give you a goal for all the players to work towards. So you're going to get 1 in Season 1. In Season 2, you'll have 2. In Season 3, you'll have 3, meaning again, there's an escalating level of these as you play. Now these over here, they're going to give you a point reward, which again will escalate across each round, and they're going to give you a goal. Have a unit in all the intermediate regions over here. The first player to achieve this will get the points here, as well as 2 movement on the favor track, which will give you all kinds of rewards and also acts as a catch mechanic, giving you points as you earn them. So yes, you do get points as a catch mechanic, but you still have to earn those points. But then over here, whoever accomplishes a goal first gets an extra movement on the favor track, so while everyone can accomplish these goals, whoever does it first will get more movement in the game. Now when you get up to the combat rounds, you're going to actually give out Excalibur to whoever is highest on the favor track, so you really are trying to move up the favor track as much as possible, because that's going to help you get Excalibur, which will go towards your leader and give you more combat symbols in the game. And there's also the Green Knight, an optional module that I do recommend that acts as a catch mechanic as well. Whoever has the least points is going to get the Green Knight, and the Green Knight will enter combat with that person, contributing their strength to that combat. So a bunch of little things going on there. Past that though, there's still more stuff to get to, but I'm going to cover the last few things and then we'll dive into the review. The last things to cover are the fact that you have abilities. You have these actions you can take on your player board, a little bit of asymmetric actions over here, and then kind of symmetrical actions for all the players over here, sort of. I say symmetrical sort of because we have to get to that. But basically, during the course of the game, you'll constantly be earning power, and you can earn power, but then spend power on these actions. As you take an action, you mark that you've done it, but you can go ahead and say, look, I'm going to spend a power and deploy 2 units to the board. So these give you a lot of flexibility outside of the cards that you're playing themselves. You also have a general catch-all action on your leader, and then a unique action down here that you can take, although again, you're all limited taking those once per season per action, but they do give you a lot of flexibility to round out the things you're doing. Now, there's a small degree of asymmetry in the starter game. You're going to have one small ability on your leader, that's kind of it, nothing really crazy, a tiny little ability, and that's it. That's in the starter game. But once you get to the full game, once you dive into it, you'll be flipping over this player board over here, and you'll get a whole different player board to work with, which is going to give you a completely asymmetrical side, where every faction has an entirely different way that they operate, and these give a huge degree of asymmetry. You do not want to play with these in your first game. I really recommend against it. Honestly, I'd recommend probably playing against it for your first 2 or even 3 games. Once you fully know the game you're diving into, go ahead and dive into and learn those powers, because every faction has a completely asymmetrical way that they do their own thing. Whether it's building towers out of the bones of your enemy and raising a skeleton army, whether it's Guinevere on a quest to go ahead and find Arthur and utilize him as an extra champion in the game, each of the 4 factions has a total degree of asymmetry that gives you a full new way to explore the game, but also a lot of rules overload, especially if you're not yet ready for it. And with that, we're going to go ahead and dive into my review, starting off with ease of play. I think the ease of play on this is decent enough. Overall, this game is not the hardest to learn. There's a few things that are a little bit not necessarily intuitive, but for the most part, it uses the mechanics and things that you've seen in other games. It bundles them together very, very well, and I think the overall package of what's going on here does make sense. It's not a hardest game to pick up. I do think the faction powers are very much a lot on top of a game that's already manageable as far as what it's doing, but you don't want to dive into those first. You want to start off without those and then work your way into those. As far as the game time over here, that's gonna be something where you can actually play a starter game that's only going to take 2 rounds, and honestly at higher player counts you may want to go with that on a regular basis just to keep this a more manageable time frame, because at a full 4-player game and a full 3 rounds you're possibly looking at as much as 3 hours, possibly getting it down as you play it more. But and again, that's not too long compared to some games, but if you are looking for a shorter experience, you could play a 2-round game, and I'm telling you, a 2-round game is a satisfying experience. 3 rounds is the best experience, in my opinion. You get a lot more out of it, and things like settlements, as well as the full abilities of your faction powers, those will only get the maximum exposure in a full 3-round game. But a 2-round game is a full experience that you will get a lot of satisfaction out of. I do think it's worth trying, especially for your first game, to get players up and running, get a sense and a flow for it before diving into the full 3-round experience. As far as my thoughts on the game, what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like. And there's a whole lot of things that I like over here. But I'm going to start off with the sheer sense of variety that the game gives you, because the game gives you a ton of variety, although you need a good game behind that, and we'll get to that as well. But the game does give you a lot of variety. You have 160 unique cards over here. Every single one of these decks gives you a full degree of every single card being unique. The general idea, you have initiatives, you have a cost, but past that, the abilities are all totally different, which means trying to figure out which combination of cards to utilize, you have complete uniqueness from these cards that are the core actions of the game. So offhand, you may play this game multiple times and barely ever see the same cards at all as you go through it, especially because you're spending a lot of them as costs, which means you're only playing 3 cards in a season, 9 cards across the whole game, well, more of them if you count the combat cards, and there's a whole lot of cards to be picking from as you go. Past that, there's the asymmetry or the variety that you're going to get from the artifacts. You're going to have a whole deck of artifacts that are going to give you, again, just new things to add to the game that are being slowly put out into the mist and giving you a reason to explore and find something that you can then go ahead and equip to your various champions or leader in order to give you a boost in ability, combat strength, and again, those give you a ton of variety as well. You have the monsters that will all have their own unique monsters and what they do, and that's before we even get into the factions, where you have a minor degree of asymmetry in the starter game, but an absolutely huge degree of asymmetry once you go into the full game experience playing as the faction. So there's just a lot of variety to this. Oh, we haven't even talked about these cards. These cards over here that are going to give you the goals every single round, that gives you even more variety to focus on. And so every single game you play of this is going to be a completely unique experience before you even get to how the players actually interact and what they do over there. Past that, the action card system as your driving force gives you a lot of control. You can work towards what it is you're trying to do in this game. You know that you can guarantee a deploy card, a move card, a settlement card, and so you have a lot of control, but then you also have a lot of your actions on your player board, whether it's your basic actions or your asymmetry actions. You have a lot of ways to fill in the gaps as far as different things your players can do by spending power or by spending your core action, and so you can go ahead and get that extra movement, explore a new region, get that explore bonus, and then play a card. You have a lot of ways of mixing and mashing the extra actions and your core card play in order to get a lot done in those 3 actions, because again, you have 3 seasons. In each of the seasons you have 3 rounds. It doesn't feel like a lot, but when you actually sit down and play it, it is a lot, and it does feel like you get a lot done in that system. The combat in the game is not punishing, which is a big thing for me in area control games. This is a game where you are going to spread out, you're going to have combats, but you don't have the sense of, oh great, you just got crushed and now your units are gone and that player still has their units on the board, because that's not going to matter, because you're resolving each individual combat and then the board is going to clear anyway. It doesn't matter how much somebody stomped you into the ground in round 1, you're going to go ahead and both wipe the board and reset anyways. There'll be some degree of presence left, so there is those settlements that will last, which that's a very relevant factor, but it also gives you something to try to decide between how much you want to fight for presence and points this round versus building up for the long-term game, because those settlements might not be worth it in round 1 on their own, but as you get the benefit of them, because they're going to add their strength to the combat, they're going to add more units every single round, those can really entrench you into the game, and trying to choose between how much you want to fight now versus how much you want to build it for the future gives you a lot to go through. But again, the main thing there is combat isn't punishing. At the end of each season, you're going to wipe the board, you're going to clear the board, you're not going to have a situation where somebody just did really, really well, and they're walking into the future season with a whole lot more board presence than you, and that's something that is very important to me in area control games. There's nothing worse than playing a game where losing every single battle can feel like, why am I even here? Now the game also escalates. The fact that you're going to get escalating points on these as well as these cards over here means you're also just getting more. If you have a very punishing round 1, if you didn't get a lot of fights won or whatever, you can still move into rounds 2 and 3 and you're getting more and more points each time. And so this is one of those games that you will feel like you still have a chance. Unless you're getting completely smoked, you will feel you have a chance as you play it. So overall, I like when games escalate that nicely, and I like when games don't give punishing combats, and this game does both of those well. Lastly, I really appreciated the focus of the champions as well as your leader. The fact that you have to think about where your champions go in order to actually play cards, because playing cards, if you don't play a card in combat, you might be set up well for second place points, but you're probably not going to win if you're not playing cards in combat, unless you're the only one there, which can happen, especially if you go last. You want to time those well as well, because sometimes you lose initiative cards, sometimes you want to go first, other times you don't want to go first. You need to pace out what works best for you. But the fact that you have these champions, you're trying to think through where they have to go, is another balance in the game that you're constantly trying to think through. How, with so few actions, do I get everything I need done and feel like I'm actually running an area control battlefield over here? And you will have that feeling, but it's a lot of trying to min-max your way through everything as you try to balance the settlements for the future rounds, your champions, your leader, your troops, the card play, the artifacts you gain, the monsters you gain. There's just a lot that you're trying to balance as you go through it all. Now, as far as things I don't like in the game, there's 2 small things, one more so than the other. But first of all is, I didn't love the fact that this favor track, it tends to be less rewarding, or less fun, I should say, if you're not winning. Because as you move up the favor track, you'll get power. Yay, that's awesome. You get a card draw, you get points, you get points. But then these over here, these intermediate spots are all ways that you get points based on how far back you are from the leader. And I like catch-up mechanics in the games, and I like catch-up mechanics in this game. I like the Green Knight, and I like the fact that those points are there. But the tricky part is is it just means that for me, when I'm playing the game, if I'm ahead, if I'm in the lead or even in second place, sometimes moving up in the favor track is still essential to do, but it just feels less fun. I'm all about feel good moments in games, and that's an area where even if it's balanced well, and I think it is, I wish there was some other reward. There's something quite as so satisfying as moving up 2 over here and then being like, oh, I'm in the lead, I get nothing. Oh wait, I moved 2 more. Oh, I'm in the lead, I get nothing. That's just not a fun moment. I wish there was something else, even if it wasn't that great, or even if you gave more points to balance out with something else. I just think that moving up a spot on the track and getting nothing for it isn't a feel-good moment in a game that is otherwise full of feel-good moments. I'll also say that the monsters don't escalate with the game. This is something where I definitely would prefer that the monsters had their own decks, or possibly even the artifacts, honestly, and it would require more maintenance as far as the actual juggling of the decks and shuffling all that, and so there is extra work that comes with this, but I do, to a certain extent, wish that the monsters for sure, and possibly the artifacts, escalated with the game rounds to be more powerful as the game went on. The fact that you could have a round, the same monster can show up in round 1 or in round 3, and you still have to go ahead and get it, even though you're not getting as much use out of those things, I think that was less fun for me, or not less fun, less fun's the wrong word, it's still fun, but I think that the decision to try to lean into or bid on a monster in round 3, or even to try to take over an artifact, you're just getting less out of those things, and I do wish those, because the game's only 3 rounds, I almost wish the artifacts and monsters were scaled around the rounds so that they were more powerful, so something you get in round 3 still feels stronger and cooler and better to actually get your hands on. So that's the only other thing that kind of, again, takes away from a little bit of the feel good, a little bit of just the balance of trying to get fun stuff later on in the game. As far as I can see others not liking, first of all, the push your luck mechanism. I enjoy the push your luck mechanism in combat. It's a different combat system. It actually feels very, very similar to in Oathsworn. If you've played Oathsworn, the other game from Shadowborne games, there's a very much a push your luck system in combats, and it feels like they took that little flavor and threw it into this as well, which I do appreciate, and I do like the system. But you might not. Having a full combat come down to the fact that I was relying on the fact that I probably wasn't going to bust, and look at that, I drew a 5 when I probably should have drawn a 1, 2, 3, or 4. Those moments are definitely going to be a little less fun over there, so you want to be mindful that as much as I do like the combat system, it will result in occasionally busting and just feeling like you played the odds and the odds smacked you in the face, which is just never as much of a fun feeling. And also I'll say that the sheer amount of card text can slow down the game, especially earlier on, and this is one of those things where even with multiple games in your belt, this still could be a problem because every single card is unique. Congratulations, I know that I have these 2 deploy cards, but I have to read and break down what they do, and whenever I'm paying for cards, if I'm trying to play a settlement card over here, I still have to figure out which cards I'm getting rid of, which means you're not only trying to look at and analyze the card you're playing, you're constantly analyzing even the cost you're paying, because am I more likely to need this deploy card or this deploy card, and you have to read them all again every single time. And so the card system, how you pay for cards, and the fact that the game is going to give you a variety of cards, those are all good things, but they do have a tail end cost on that mental processing time as you try to decide what to do every single round. As far as final thoughts on Avalon the Riven Veil, I expected to like this game primarily because A, it's area control, which is a genre I enjoy, and then more importantly, it's coming to you from Shadowborne Games, who have done Oathsworn, which is a game I very much enjoy. And so I was expecting to like this no matter what. What I didn't know is how much I would like it. And I was very much blown away by how enjoyable the game system is. Specifically, this is a game that you can play. Like, I remember, like, when I first played this game, I sat down, I played actually online TTS with the designers, and I played even just 1 round. And I was like, 1 round felt like a fulfilling experience. 1 solitary round where you don't even have all the build-up, you don't even have the benefit of your settlements, but still, it felt like a rewarding enough experience in terms of me trying to min-max every single decision I make, me trying to play the cards, trying to take advantage of the actions. And again, that's before I got to a full game, and that's before I got to the asymmetry of the factions. And so a single round out of the single season, I should be very careful because I think of seasons as rounds and then the rounds as turns, so I may have used those terms interchangeably, but it's seasons, and in seasons you have rounds. But a single season of the game feels like a fulfilling experience. And the game gets only better as you play out the full game system and as you add the asymmetry of the factions. There's just a lot going on here, from powers and abilities, from variety of gameplay, from complete and strong asymmetry to the decision space you have around the cards you draw constantly. You're always choosing which decks to draw from and then which cards to play. There's just so many ways to build your way forward in this game while giving you a complete smorgasbord of artifacts, faction asymmetry, and monsters that will mix up your game experience every single time. This is an absolute blast of a board game that, and again, even at its longest, comes in at around 3 hours, but you can more accurately knock out a game. If you're playing a 3-player game for full 3 rounds, you might be able to knock this down in 2, maybe 2.5 hours, and so it's coming coming in at a very reasonable time frame for the sheer amount of game experience you get out of this. For me, this is a 5 out of 5, an incredible area control game, very quickly rising to one of my favorite area control games in my collection. If you're looking for other game recommendations, definitely check out Blood Rage, which just feels very reminiscent of Blood Rage between the 3 rounds of play, between the monsters. It definitely feels like it's built a little bit on Blood Rage DNA, while being a completely different beast in its own right. And then another game to check out, especially if you enjoy the action cards and the way you have a core action but then variety to it. This is very reminiscent to me of Ruination, another area control game I really enjoy, in which you have 3 main decks, each deck giving you a core action but then variety to them as you take the individual cards and powers. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you found this video helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.